Back in 2021, Splitgate had one of the most meteoric rises to fame any indie developer could wish for, with over 60,000 players on release and $100 million in funding. This was a level of success that even the AAA studios dreamed of, but there were three major issues that the game faced that would spell disaster for Splitgate following its release and cost a huge chunk of the player base to just walk away. And I was one of the few people playing Splitgate on release, so I got to experience the heist, but if you look at the game and how it's running now, it's gotten so bad that half the time the people you queue up with are really just bots because the game's really struggling to fill up their lobbies. So now the obvious question to ask is, what exactly happened to the Halo with Portals games that seemed to blow up out of nowhere, and where is the Splitgate community headed to now? Well, it all started at Stanford University, where two students named Ian and Nicholas, they were both working on a school project that would eventually become the Splitgate that we know today. They wanted to take the concept from the Portal franchise, where you can put down two portals on the map and instantly be able to move between them, and they wanted to add that into a first-person shooter game. And since these two guys were fans of the Halo series, they modeled their entire game kind of just based off of Halo, and they decided to name their beautiful creation Wormhole Wars. Thank God they decided to change it into Splitgate afterwards, because Wormhole Wars, that was never going to stick. But here's the interesting thing about Splitgate and its design. The characters looked like Spartans from Halo, multiplayer modes and gunplay resembled Halo multiplayer modes, and even the weapons were just like a few tweaks away from being Halo weapons. People are not memeing around when they say that Splitgate is just Halo with portals. It is literally Halo with portals. And you could argue that there was a lack of originality when it came to the game's design, but that would actually end up being one of the biggest factors that would help skyrocket the game's success on release, because the Halo community at the time was doing pretty bad. Like, they hadn't seen a new game ever since Halo 5, so 2015, and a Halo-like game coming out at the right time really felt like a breath of fresh air for the very neglected community that is the Halo community. But unfortunately, this would also end up being one of the biggest reasons why Splitgate would hit a wall that would really screw their momentum leading up to its release. Because like what happened afterwards was really just worst case scenario for any game release out there. So let's go back to July 2021 for a second. Splitgate came out with some viral marketing on TikTok and they got everybody playing their game. And do you remember that 60,000 player number that I mentioned earlier? That wasn't technically true because that only counted for the PC players, and this game released on console with crossplay enabled, so that number was probably in the ballpark of 100,000 players at the time. The Halo fanbase was so touch-starved from years of neglect that literally anything that even remotely resembled Halo was enough to get them excited. So with all the momentum in the world, Splitgate announced that on August 25th, Battle Pass Season 0 was starting, and that meant new maps, new skins, new game modes, new everything. And that would have been the best day for Splitgate since they profited $100 million over the course of their Battle Pass, but their party would unfortunately get crashed because on August 25th, that very same day, the latest installment in the Halo series, Halo Infinite, got announced. Talk about major drama, and I don't know if this was premeditated or if just like the stars aligned in this universal coincidence, but the fact of the matter is that the one thing that made Splitgate so popular was the fact that Halo had been MIA for 6 years, and everyone in the Halo community was super excited to play Splitgate. But now that Halo Infinite was announced, the one advantage that Splitgate had literally just went up and vanished. Because on the biggest day for Splitgate, everyone was already looking forward to jumping ship as soon as Halo Infinite released. That was the worst case scenario, and it happened. Another big issue that surfaced afterwards that really started to mess up with the Splitgate community was the fact that the game was struggling to keep people engaged for long periods of time. Meaning that you picked up the game and you had your classic selection of game modes like Team Deathmatch and the sorts, but you have to remember that this was in the middle of 2021. This was a time where Battle Royale games still completely dominated the market. So once you got a couple of games in, you kind of just realize that there's no grandiose objective, there's no victory royale for you to chase after, it is just mindlessly shooting the enemy player. So after a few games, you kind of realized that Splitgate felt almost outdated, or just out of place with the current meta of shooter games. Splitgate was obviously not everybody's cup of tea. There's no perfect game out there that pleases everybody, but on top of that, the game also developed a very high skill cap once people learned how to use the portals properly, which obviously is not necessarily a bad thing because a high skill cap means that the games are much more interesting in higher levels of gameplay, the tournaments are crazy to watch, everyone's excited, all of that. But at the same time, it doesn't make the game new player friendly. So know that feeling when you're playing Fortnite and you run into a building demon that you know you have absolutely no chance to beat because you just don't play the game like that, you're more of a shooter type of person? That's how it felt to play Splitgate if you ran into one of these portal demons. If the enemy team had just one portal demon and your whole team was just comprised of shooter types, none of you stood a chance, because this was entirely out of your league. So a lot of issues with the gameplay itself kind of just turned the players off from the game, and if you look at how Splitgate is running these days, one of the biggest complaints from people is that there isn't much to do in the game other than just shoot the enemy players, which I know sounds like duh. Obviously you're playing a first-person shooter game, the objective is to shoot the enemy players, but people are just getting used to having something to grind for, you know, some achievement to unlock, some, like I mentioned, some victory royale to chase after. So now it's like if your game doesn't have a completely fleshed out grindable experience, people kind of just call your game a dead game. But the one thing that really sealed the nail in the coffin for Splitgate was what came after all of that, once they realized that they just could not compete with Halo Infinite, and a big chunk of the player base had already left and they moved back to their regularly scheduled games like Apex Legends, Fortnite, Valorant. After all of that happened, things got pretty bad for the remaining population of the Splitgate community, because this next decision was pretty controversial, and to this day, the few regulars that stayed in Splitgate are still pretty on the fence about it. Some people still think it's a great idea, you know, they're feeling amazing about it, while other people are still kind of very salty about the fact that it's happening. But the Splitgate developers took their huge stack of money that they made, and they decided to end the development of Splitgate. They decided to just call it quits because now they want to work on something entirely new. They basically took their spoils of war and they wanted to focus their resources on developing a brand new experience that some people are calling Splitgate 2, but they've confirmed that it's not Splitgate 2, and they've also confirmed that none of your skins are transferring or any progression or anything like that is moving on to the new game. The few things that they have confirmed so far is that the game's going to be a shooter game, it's going to have portals, and it's going to be on Unreal Engine 5. You know, in my opinion, that just sounds like fancier Splitgate. But to put it in their own way, what they said is that in a way they're bailing water while also trying to keep everyone who bought a ticket to board our ship happy, while also trying to turn our boat into a rocket ship. So basically, they realized that working on a game that they developed in college and trying to expand on it is kind of difficult, right? They had initial problems when the game first blew up because the servers just could not handle it, and now they're realizing that, you know, I think it's easier for them to just work on something completely different. So anyone in the community who was still left at this point, hoping that the game would make a huge comeback at one point, had their hopes basically shattered in front of them, and anyone who spent money on skins and battle passes obviously felt upset about this, but the developers eventually decided to just make a brand new game. So with that being said, the Splitgate community has just been falling off for the longest time. It's losing players by the month, and people who are still hopeful for Splitgate are kind of just sitting on the sidelines at this moment because they don't know if the game's going to be a battle royale or an extraction shooter or like an Overwatch tactical shooter. Nobody knows anything, and people are obviously kind of worried about that because it might be an awesome game and, you know, it might bring back the Splitgate community once again, or it might just flop entirely. But one cool thing I will mention that the developers did before they decided to just stop developing on Splitgate was that they implemented community-made maps, so at least the community can be holding the game up while the developers are busy doing something else entirely. And you know, despite the fact that the developers basically dropped the game for the most part, they're still very in love with the game. They still actively participate in the community. They also do this thing where if you find a developer in your match and you actually kill them and you send them a screenshot, they actually send you a skin, or, you know, at least that's what I read. I haven't done this myself, I'm not very good at the game. But, you know, they're still very much active in the community, and you can tell that this is a game that not only did they make, but they also, you know, have fun in. They have fun playing their creation. So whether it was the right call or not for them to drop Splitgate to just go full-time focus on this new project, I don't know exactly. I don't know what kind of impact that's going to have in the community over the long run, if the community is going to come back when the new stuff shows up. I don't know any of that, but all I know is that these developers clearly do care about their game and what they've created, and I'm hoping that whenever Splitgate 2 comes out, hopefully it makes a big impact like it did with the first one. I don't know, man, but I'm looking forward to it for sure. And yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about with you guys, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.